This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has said that Algeria will keep summoning meetings and initiatives to ensure that the UN Security Council and General Assembly assume their responsibility towards the Palestinian people. The UN Security Council is holding today a briefing session followed by close consultations on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry has been granted to 3 scientists for their work on proteins, the building blocks of life that are found in every cell of the body. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Smani. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has pointed at the major axis of Algeria's diplomacy and her constant principles regarding just causes. Asya Bikar has more.
Speaking on the occasion of a celebration of the National Diplomacy Day held under the theme and change in positions to reinforce the values of peace and the virtues of international cooperation, the Algerian diplomacy chief shed light on the deep ties uniting Algeria with the countries and peoples of the Sahel neighborhood, stressing that those who try to sow discord between Algeria and her neighbors ignore Algeria's role and position alongside her brothers in all circumstances and at all times. He added that despite the complex conditions facing the Sahel-Saharan region, Algeria will always pull efforts to positively influence development in its neighborhood.
As for the Sahel-Saharan region, which is facing difficult conditions that are neither easy nor passing by or transient as a result of the various security, political, development and environmental challenges, Algeria reiterates that she will not turn its back, stand aside or spare any effort to positively influence the situation in its neighborhood.
Concerning the Palestinian question, Ahmed Attaf affirmed that the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has given firm instructions so that the defense of the Palestinian cause is an absolute priority for Algeria at the UN Security Council. He said Algeria will keep summoning meetings and initiatives to ensure that the UN Security Council and General Assembly assume their responsibility towards the Palestinian people and all the countries and peoples of the region suffering from Israeli aggression.
In the face of the regression of the multilateral international action, the unilateral tendency and selfishness emerged as an option to protect narrow interests and push aside urgent priorities. The incapacity and weakness of the common security system led to excessive aggression and use of force to resolve conflicts. The genocidal war imposed on the Palestinian people in Gaza marked its first anniversary yesterday in the face of the international community's inability to do justice to these oppressed and bullied people. What we fear now is to witness another Gaza with the current situation besetting brotherly Lebanon. The images are almost the same. We can no longer differentiate Gaza from Lebanon. The international community is now observing the situation in Iran as there is a possibility of the expansion of Israeli crimes and the emergence of a regional conflict that may have serious repercussions on the region.
Regarding the Western Sahara question, Mr. Attaf said the UN must assume its responsibility vis-à-vis the Western Sahara cause being a decolonization issue, saying that the recent decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union have destroyed the desperate attempts to bury the foundations of this cause with the aim of imposing a colonial fait accompli.
The United Nations should shoulder its full responsibility with regard to the Western Sahara issue, the last colony in Africa and the oldest conflict in our regional neighborhood. The recent decisions by the European Court of Justice have confirmed well-established facts recognized by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, for almost 50 years, that the Sahrawi cause is a question of decolonization and that the Sahrawi people remain entitled to exercise their inalienable and imprescriptible right to self-determination. The myth of autonomy cannot underpin any solution, as it is fundamentally at odds with the right to self-determination. The definitive settlement of this conflict can only be achieved through a process of direct negotiations between the two parties to the conflict, the Polisario Front as the sole legal representative of the Sahrawi people and the Kingdom of Morocco as the occupying party of the territory of Western Sahara.
Regarding relations with its Mediterranean neighborhood and the European Union, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, said that Algeria is pursuing its efforts to establish a balanced and beneficial partnership in its Mediterranean neighborhood and with the European Union.
تواصل الجزائر مساعيها وجهودها الرامية.
Algeria is continuing its efforts to establish a balanced, beneficial and targeted partnership in its Mediterranean neighborhood and with the EU in particular. The partnership must fully comply with the principle of balancing the interests of both parties and give priority to supporting economic development efforts in our country without any restrictions, conditions or obstacles. The partnership must also go beyond the logic of immediate commercial profit to form part of a broader strategic approach based on sustainable development in all its dimensions. As the President of the Republic said 2 days ago, Algeria intends to proceed with the revision of the association agreement with the EU, which will be carried out in a climate of trust, flexibility and understanding in order to restore the necessary balance to this agreement and adapt it to the new economic reality of our country as an effective tool for achieving the desired sustainable development. Algerian diplomacy will continue under the guidance of the President of the Republic to strengthen relations between Algeria and its sister countries, friends and partners.
The Algerian diplomacy chief said Algeria strengthened her positive and constructive diplomatic role on the international scene and at the level of the various Arab, African and Mediterranean areas.
We are very proud of the historical legacy of Algerian diplomacy, thanks to which Algeria is working today under the enlightened leadership of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, to strengthen its positive and constructive diplomatic role on the international scene and at the level of the various Arab, African and Mediterranean regions. Diplomacy Day is a blessed day when the national flag was proudly raised at the UN building, marking Algeria's return to the international scene through the main door as a sovereign country that has won its independence and its place thanks to unparalleled sacrifices in the history of nations. Algeria's guidelines lie in its faithfulness and loyalty to the values and principles that build the identity of its foreign policy, notably the values of freedom, justice, solidarity, cooperation, and the principles of respecting the UN Charter, the international legality, and the fulfillment of commitments.
The celebration of this day was marked by the broadcast of a documentary on Algerian diplomacy, which highlighted its active role in ensuring that the international community respects the principles of the UN and the laws that guarantee human rights, as well as its pioneering role at the regional and international levels.
The Speaker of the Council of the Nation, Saleh Goujil, has expressed his pride in the voice of truth defended by Algerian diplomats under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, in support of Palestine and all just causes around the world. He said, on this National Diplomacy Day, we celebrate Algeria's new diplomatic glory of the new Novemberist Algeria, and we are proud of the voice of truth defended by our diplomats under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. Sonatrach CEO Rashid Hashishi is taking part with a high-level delegation of the group's senior executives in the 13th session of the St. Petersburg International Gas Forum in Russia. The forum, which runs until Thursday tomorrow, will provide an opportunity to review Sonatrach's capacities and pioneering experience in the gas industry, in addition to bringing together major gas industrialists with a view to consolidating relations with Russian and international and even global energy companies, and to discuss ways of enhancing cooperation and examine business opportunities. The Lebanese Ministry of Health has announced that the death toll from Zionist airstrikes on various regions of Lebanon over the last 24 hours has increased to 36 deaths and 150 wounded. 6 people were killed and 8 others wounded in the Bekaa region, while the governorate of Nabatea there were 30 deaths and 121 injured. The ministry added that 20 people were injured in Mount Lebanon, while 1 person was injured in the Baalbek Hermel district. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that Lebanon is on the brink of total war, but there is still time to stop it. Speaking to reporters at the UN headquarters in New York, Antonio Guterres said the following.
I've warned for months of the risks of the conflict spreading, and the Middle East is a powder keg with many parties holding the match. The situation in the occupied West Bank is boiling over, and now in Lebanon, attacks including on civilians are threatening the entire region. Large-scale Israeli strikes deep into Lebanon, including Beirut, have killed more than 2,000 people over the last year and 1,500 in just the past 2 weeks alone. Lebanese authorities report over 1 million people have been displaced in Lebanon and 300,000 people have fled into Syria. We are on the verge of an all-out war in Lebanon with already devastating consequences. But there is still time to stop.
The toll from the Israeli genocidal aggression against the Gaza Strip has risen to 42,010 killed and 97,720 wounded, mostly women and children, since 7 October 2023. According to the same source, the Israeli occupation army has committed 3 massacres in the last 24 hours in the Gaza Strip, killing 45 people and wounding 130. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, is more essential than ever and more irreplaceable than ever. For this reason, the UN chief said that he had informed the Israeli occupation authorities of his deep concern about a new measure that could prevent UNRWA from continuing its essential work in the occupied Palestinian territory. Said Bouazi reports.
Antonio Guterres said that such a measure would stifle efforts to relieve human suffering and tension in Gaza.
In the midst of all the upheaval, UNRWA, more than ever, is indispensable. UNRWA, more than ever, is irreplaceable. That is why I've written directly to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express profound concern about draft legislation that could prevent UNRWA from continuing its essential work in the occupied Palestinian territory. Such a measure would suffocate efforts to ease human suffering and tensions in Gaza and indeed the entire occupied Palestinian territory. It would be a catastrophe in what is already an unmitigated disaster. Operationally, the legislation would likely deal a terrible blow to the international humanitarian response in Gaza. UNRWA's activities are integral to that response. It's not feasible to isolate one UN agency from the others.
Without UNRWA, the delivery of food, shelter and healthcare to most of the population of Gaza would be interrupted, said Antonio Guterres.
Without UNRWA, Gaza's 660,000 children would lose the only entity that is able to restart education, risking the fate of an entire generation. And without UNRWA, many health, education and social services would also end in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. If approved, such legislation would be diametrically opposed to the UN Charter, and politically, such legislation would be an enormous setback to sustainable peace efforts and to a two-state solution, fanning even more instability and insecurity. This draft legislation comes at a situation in which Gaza is in a death spiral.
The nightmare in Gaza is now entering its second atrocious and abominable year, underlined the UN chief.
The UN Security Council is holding a meeting or briefing session later today, followed by close consultations on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Under the agenda item, the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. Algeria and Slovenia, with the support of France, requested the meeting, and members are expected to hear two briefings. The first from Lisa Dutton, head of the finance section of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, and the second from Filippo Lazzarini, Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA. Scientists David Baker, John Jumper and Demis Hassabis have won the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the work on proteins, the building blocks of life that are found in every cell of the body. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences on Wednesday announced half of the prize to Baker for computational protein design and the other half jointly to Hassabis and Jumper for protein structure prediction. Heiner Linke, chair of the committee, said scientists had long dreamed of predicting the three-dimensional structure of proteins. This is Radio Algeria International. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. First in the news, the Minister of Finance, Laziz Faïd, has received a delegation from the Qatari group Ooredoo, led by its CEO Aziz Uthman Fakhru, with whom he discussed ways of consolidating cooperation and developing the group's activities in Algeria, according to a press release from the ministry. During the meeting, the two parties welcomed the new impetus given to the bilateral economic relations, which has resulted in particular in the conclusion of partnership agreements in various fields such as health, agriculture and industry. The Minister of Industry and Pharmaceutical Production, Ali Aoun, has received the Director of the Africa and Middle East region of the Stellantis Group, Samir Sherfan, and the CEO of the Stellantis El Jazair Group, Rawi Beji, with whom he discussed the state of progress of the Fiat car manufacturing project in Algeria, according to a press release from the ministry. On this occasion, Ali Aoun stressed the importance of increasing the plant's production volume with a view to providing citizens with substantial supplies as quickly as possible, concluded the press release. An agreement has been signed in Algiers between the University of Algiers 1 bin Youssef bin Khadda and the National Support and Development Agency ANAD as part of the partnership between the sector and the world of entrepreneurship. Under this agreement, the University of Algiers 1 will provide teaching resources and will launch a website dedicated to the activities of the Entrepreneurship Development Center, added the same official. In more Algerian economic news, the energy group Sonatrach has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Nigerian oil company Sonidep with a view to creating opportunities for bilateral cooperation, notably in the fields of exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbons, said a press release from the state-owned group. The Memorandum of Understanding will enable the two companies to discuss opportunities for cooperation in the exploration, exploitation and refining of hydrocarbons, petrochemicals and the marketing and distribution of petroleum products, added the same source. A delegation from the World Bank has been received at the Ministry of Energy and Mines, where ways of strengthening cooperation between the two parties in various areas of the sector have been examined, according to a press release from the ministry. During this meeting, the two parties examined the possibilities for cooperation between Algeria and the World Bank, notably in terms of exchanging expertise and technical support for current and future projects, including those related to development of renewable energies, photovoltaic solar energy and wind power, the development of green hydrogen, regional electricity interconnections, and Algeria's efforts to reduce emissions and projects in the sector in general. Several operators and players in the subcontracting sector have called in Algiers for the promotion of mechanisms to promote national integration at industrial level. In a statement to the press on the sidelines of the opening ceremony of the 9th edition of the trade fair dedicated to industrial subcontracting and integration, Algest, the chairman of the Algerian Subcontracting and Partnership BSTP, Kamel Agsous, stressed the importance of strengthening incentives aimed at developing the integration of the national industry. Kamel Agsous pointed out that incentives, customs and tax exemptions for local producers should enable the emergence of companies capable of meeting the needs of major national contractors. And to wrap it up, the Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Tayyip Zitouni, has announced in Algiers the organization of 7 seasonal markets specialized in the marketing of agricultural products, aimed at regulating prices and reducing the number of intermediaries between producer and consumer. Presiding over the opening of the first edition of the National Fruit and Vegetable Fair with the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Youssef Sherfa, Tayyip Zitouni stated that his department is preparing to organize a fruit and vegetable market through 7 markets, each specialized in a particular product: grapes, dates, garlic, apple, olive, citrus, etc., at the level of 5 provinces of the country, in order to meet the needs of the market, reduce the number of intermediaries between producer and consumer, and offer these products at reasonable prices. And with this, we come to the end of our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. Take care and bye-bye for now.
Since joining the United Nations Security Council in January 2024, Algeria has consolidated its leading role in defending the Palestinian cause. This mandate constitutes a crucial step in Algeria's diplomatic efforts to promote recognition of the rights of the Palestinian people and support their quest for independence. Under the leadership of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, the Palestinian issue has become a priority of Algerian foreign policy, in line with a long tradition of support for Palestine. In just a few months, Algeria achieved significant results, as illustrated by Palestine's admission to the United Nations General Assembly. Although Palestine is not yet a full member, this symbolic recognition represents an important step towards the full recognition of its rights. This success is the result of diplomatic efforts supported by Algeria, which has worked with friendly countries to put pressure on the international community and guarantee Palestine a more active role within the United Nations. This diplomatic victory resonated around the world, and many countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia quickly followed suit, officially recognizing the Palestinian state. Algeria was able to convince several states to support the creation of an independent Palestinian state, thus broadening international support for the Palestinian cause. This movement demonstrates Algeria's growing influence on the global diplomatic scene and its resolute commitment to the Palestinian right to self-determination. President Tebboune's statement on Palestine were crucial in highlighting the injustices suffered by Palestinian people. He stressed that peace would only be possible with the full recognition of the rights of Palestinians, including the right to an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. His firm positions were welcomed by many Arab and Muslim countries, which consider Algeria as a leader in the defense of just causes and a resolute opponent of foreign interventions. Algerian support for Palestine is not limited to political statements. On a practical level, Algeria has stepped up its humanitarian and economic aid to the Palestinians, ensuring that they are not forgotten in discussions on peace in the Middle East. This concrete aid, combined with active diplomacy, demonstrates Algeria's comprehensive and sincere commitment to the Palestinian cause. President Tebboune took advantage of the Arab League platform to call on the Arab nations not to normalize their relations with a Zionist entity until a just solution to the Palestinian question is found. He warned that any marginalization of Palestine would constitute a betrayal of its people and an obstacle to peace in the region. This clear position strengthens Algeria's credibility with other Arab and Muslim nations, which share its vision of united resistance against international pressure for normalization. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, reiterated that Algeria considers Palestine's independence part of her own independence, and Algeria will keep making efforts at the UN for Palestine's full membership.
بالنسبة لفلسطين، احنا فلسطين استقلالها قالوها الزعماء الجزائريين رحمهم الله في بداية الاستقلال، قال استقلالنا ما يتم إلا يوم تستقل فلسطين. نعتبر استقلالنا ناقص، وعلى هذا المبدأ ماشيين، وعلى هذا المبدأ نسير حتى نصل إلى دولة فلسطين كاملة الحقوق في حدودها في 1967. الفصائل تشرذم تاع الشعوب ضعف قوة فلسطين في وحدتها، وشاعرين بها الإخوان الفلسطينيين. قبلوا الاجتماع في الجزائر لأن الجزائر مبدئيا لا تستغل أي وحدة. نطلب ونحن نناضل حاليا مع بعض الدول الأخرى مثل الصين أن تكون عضو في الأمم المتحدة ولو مستعمرة، ولكن عضو كامل في الأمم المتحدة، ما تبقاش ملاحظ في الأمم المتحدة، وهذه إن شاء الله سنصل إليه.
Algeria's mandate as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council coincided with the unfortunate Israeli genocide against Gaza, an act that was condemned and relentlessly pointed out by Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, who called for imposing an immediate ceasefire to avoid further escalation in the region.
على المجموعة الدولية
The international community should answer the calls for putting a halt to the killings that target the Palestinians by urging for an immediate ceasefire. Those who oppose or block the ceasefire should reconsider their policy and calculations, because the wrong decisions made today will be reaped as violence and instability tomorrow in our region and the whole world.
عنفاً وعدم استقرار.
Meanwhile, Algeria clearly stated at the UN that the international community is blatantly loose when it comes to the Israeli violation of international law. During the general debate of the UN General Assembly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, shed light on the current multifaceted Israeli escalation, stressing that the international community is not yet firm in the face of Israeli aggression and expansion, which gives the occupation a green light to commit further crimes.
فما يحدث في غزة من حرب إبادة جماعية متواصلة.
The relentless genocide that has been taking place in Gaza for a whole year now, and the expansion of this war to the West Bank lately and Lebanon currently, and what is happening in the whole region due to the Israeli multifaceted and multi-front escalation would not have happened if the international community took a firm position once the aggression started by imposing on the Israeli colonial occupation what was imposed on others in terms of punitive and deterrent measures provided by the 7th chapter of the United Nations Charter. The international community should impose an immediate halt to the nightmare suffered by the Palestinian and the Lebanese peoples and curb the Israeli occupier's savagery and its will to plunge the Middle East region in a series of crises, conflicts and permanent and endless wars. The international community is also required to realize that the current situation is a turning point in the history of the Palestinian cause.
من تاريخ القضية الفلسطينية.
Despite the ongoing challenges, including the persistence of the conflict on the ground and the opposition of certain powers, the results of Algerian diplomacy are undeniable. Algeria has been able to rally international support for the Palestinian cause and advance concrete initiatives at the UN while maintaining pressure to ensure that Palestinian rights are respected. Algeria's mandate at the Security Council, which will continue until 2025, offers a valuable